The silent scream in space. The void of space was silent, cold, endless. Stars stretched far and wide, distant pinpricks of light in the eternal darkness. In this vast emptiness, a single escape pod drifted, small, broken, forgotten. Inside the pod, Rilke lay slumped against the control panel. Her breathing was weak, her purple skin pale. The tiny compartment was filled with the sound of failing systems, a flickering screen, a soft beeping warning of low oxygen, and the faint hum of dying power cells. She tried to move, but her body refused. Too weak, too much pain. Her species, the Valen, did not speak words like humans. They spoke with their minds, sending thoughts and feelings across space. But here, in the cold loneliness of the pod, there was no one to hear her. She reached out desperately. "Please, someone, help me." No answer, just the same endless silence. Her vision blurred. She was running out of time. A human hears the impossible. On the far side of the sector, Captain Daniel Carter leaned back in his pilot's seat, arms crossed behind his head. His ship, the Starfire, drifted peacefully as he checked his cargo logs. It was supposed to be an easy job: pick up supplies, deliver them, and get paid. Nothing unusual. Just another routine flight through the outer rim. Then suddenly, a voice. "Help me, please." Daniel sat up straight, his heart pounding. He looked around the cockpit, expecting to see someone behind him. But he was alone. "Is someone there?" He spoke out loud, but the voice wasn't coming through his comms. It was inside his head. He rubbed his temples, confused. Was he going crazy? Hearing things. Then the feeling hit him, a crushing wave of fear, loneliness, pain. It wasn't just words. It was emotions, raw and desperate. And then silence again. Daniel's fingers flew across the controls, scanning the area. At first, nothing appeared, just empty space. But then, a faint distress signal, weak, almost gone. His screen flickered, displaying the location of a drifting escape pod. His gut told him something was wrong. The signal was too faint, almost like someone was trying to hide it. But that voice, the fear in it. Daniel clenched his jaw. He couldn't ignore it. "All right," he muttered. "Let's go save someone." He pushed the thrusters forward, setting a course toward the lost signal. The ghostly pod. As Daniel's ship approached, he got his first real look at the escape pod. It was small, dented, and covered in scorch marks, like it had barely survived an attack. He activated the scanners again. No life signs. His fingers hovered over the controls. If there was no one alive, why did he hear that voice? A cold chill ran down his spine. Maybe this was some kind of trap. Pirates sometimes used fake distress signals to lure ships in. Still, he had to know. With a deep breath, he maneuvered the Starfire closer and docked with the pod. The metal frame groaned as his ship latched onto it. The hatch controls flickered weakly, unresponsive. Daniel grabbed his plasma cutter, took a step forward, and sliced through the door. First contact. The moment the door hissed open, Daniel felt it again. A powerful wave of fear, relief, and exhaustion crashed into his mind. It almost knocked him off his feet. He stepped inside the pod, scanning the dim interior. That's when he saw her. A girl, not human. She was small, fragile-looking, with deep purple skin and long silver hair. Her breathing was shallow, her body limp against the control panel. Daniel's instincts kicked in. He rushed forward, checking her pulse. Weak, but alive. "Hey, can you hear me?" he said, shaking her gently. Her eyelids fluttered. Then, her voice was in his head again. You heard me." Daniel's breath caught. Not only was she alive, she was the one who spoke to him telepathically. He had no idea what she was, but one thing was clear. She needed help, and he was the only one who could hear her. The lost pod and the race against time. Rilke's eyelids fluttered weakly, her silver-white eyes struggling to focus on the human above her. She had never seen one up close before. His features were sharp, his skin pale compared to her own deep purple. But more than his appearance, there was something else, a presence, a human, who could hear her. Daniel knelt beside her, scanning her body for injuries. Her breathing was ragged, her skin clammy. The dim red light of the failing pod flickered around them, casting eerie shadows on the metal walls. "You heard me," she whispered, but her lips never moved. The voice rang in his mind. Daniel swallowed. "Yeah, I did. Who are you? What happened?" Rilke coughed weakly, her body trembling. "No time. They're coming." The word sent a chill through Daniel's spine. "Who's coming?" He turned, glancing at the flickering control panel. Most of it was dead, but one message still flashed in alien script. He didn't understand the language, but he could guess the meaning. Emergency distress signal active. Daniel's stomach tightened. If this pod had been transmitting a distress beacon, who else had heard it? "The oxygen is running out." A sharp beeping sound filled the pod. Daniel looked up. One of the only working screens displayed a countdown. Oxygen remaining, 5 minutes. His eyes widened. If he didn't get her out now, she wouldn't make it. "All right, no time for introductions," he muttered. He moved quickly, unstrapping the emergency breather from his belt. "Here, put this on." Rilke was too weak to lift her hands. Daniel sighed and carefully placed the mask over her face, securing the straps. The mask released a hiss as it pumped oxygen into her lungs. She gasped, her body jerking as the fresh air filled her system. Her eyes widened with a mixture of relief and fear. "We must leave," she sent to his mind. "Now." Daniel didn't argue. He reached down, scooped her up in his arms, and carried her toward the airlock. She was lighter than he expected, her thin frame barely weighing anything. But just as he stepped into the docking tube connecting his ship to the pod, his scanner beeped a warning. "Incoming ship DTKTE." Daniel's pulse spiked. Someone else had arrived. "The hunters have arrived." He sprinted into his ship, sealing the airlock behind him. The moment he laid Rilke down in the med bay, he rushed to the cockpit. A red light blinked on his console. His proximity alarm was screaming. A ship was approaching. Daniel's fingers flew over the controls, activating his sensors. The readings came back fast, and the results made his blood run cold. A Xerath Hunter-class vessel. That wasn't a patrol ship. That was a warship. His jaw clenched. The Xerath were bad news, merciless enforcers of the Dominion, known for their brutal tactics. If they were after Rilke, this wasn't just some random rescue mission. This was a hunt. Daniel turned toward Rilke. "You need to tell me what's going on. Who are they? Why are they after you?" She looked at him, still weak but more alert now. Her voice rang in his mind, filled with urgency. "If they find me, they will kill us both." A warning flashed on Daniel's screen. LOCONDTTTED. His heart pounded. The Xerath ship was targeting him. He didn't know why he could hear this alien girl's voice. He didn't know why she was running. But he did know one thing. He wasn't about to let her die. Daniel grabbed the controls and slammed the thrusters to full power. The chase was on. The Galactic warning. The Starfire shuddered as its thrusters roared to life. Daniel's hands gripped the controls, his eyes locked on the incoming Xerath Hunter-class vessel. The ship was massive, black as the void, with jagged wings and a glowing red insignia, the mark of the Xerath Dominion. They weren't here for a casual inspection. They were here for her. Rilke clutched the side of the med bay, struggling to sit up. Her breath was still uneven, but her mind was clearer now. "They have found me," her voice echoed in Daniel's mind, laced with exhaustion and fear. He didn't have time for questions. His scanner pinged, a weapons lock. "Hold on," Daniel shouted. He yanked the controls to the side, rolling the Starfire just as a plasma blast shot past, barely missing the hull. The explosion rocked his ship, alarms blaring across the cockpit. Rilke gritted her teeth. They won't stop. If they capture me, they will kill you too. Great, Daniel muttered, flipping switches frantically. That makes me feel so much better. The truth about the Exareth. The Exareth warship loomed closer, moving with terrifying precision. It was like a predator toying with its prey. Daniel needed answers. Fast. Why are they after you? He demanded, dodging another plasma shot. What did you do? Rilke steadied herself against the cockpit wall, her silver eyes burning with urgency. I didn't do anything. I was born different. Daniel risked a glance at her. Different how? She hesitated, then placed her hand on his arm. A strange warmth spread through his mind, and suddenly, he saw it. Memories. Not his. Hers. A darkened laboratory. A cold metal table. Tirath scientists surrounding a young Rilke, their red eyes filled with greed. The Valen are telepaths, she explained, her voice weaving into his thoughts. But I was born stronger than the others. That Exareth, they see me as a weapon. They killed my people, took me as an experiment. More images flashed, prison cells, experiments, endless pain. Then, a desperate escape, a stolen pod, a leap into the void. And then, Daniel. The vision ended. Daniel snapped back to reality, breathing hard. The Exareth didn't just want Rilke. They wanted to control her. And if they caught her again, they'd never let her go. Nowhere left to run. Another explosion shook the Starfire. The Exareth ship had closed the distance. Warning. Shields at 40%. Daniel gritted his teeth. He had fought pirates, dodged asteroid storms, even smuggled illegal goods past military patrols. But this. He was up against a Exareth warship. He had no chance in a direct fight. We have to jump to hyperspace, Rilke urged. It's our only chance. Daniel checked the nav computer. Bad news. Their weapons scrambled my hyperdrive. He growled. We're stuck until I fix it. Then we fight. Daniel blinked at her. Excuse me. We? You can barely stand. Rilke's silver eyes flashed. She took a deep breath and touched his arm again. I can help you. The moment her fingers brushed his skin, a surge of energy rushed through Daniel's mind. His vision sharpened. The cockpit controls seemed clearer. He could feel the enemy ship, its movement, its intent. I am linked to your mind now, Rilke whispered. I can show you what they will do before they do it. Daniel's hands gripped the controls as the Exareth ship fired again. This time, he moved before the shot was fired. Dodge. Roll. Counter-maneuver. He was moving at impossible speed. Rilke's voice was in his mind. Trust me. For the first time in his life, Daniel wasn't flying alone. A new weapon. The Exareth captain watched from his warship, his red eyes narrowing. This human pilot, he hissed. He shouldn't be this good. Daniel's ship twisted and dodged like he could see the future. Fire ion torpedoes. The captain barked. Inside the Starfire, alarms screamed. Missile LCKDT-KTE. Daniel's heart pounded. His ship didn't have the firepower to take a direct hit. Rilke closed her eyes. Then, something strange happened. The incoming missile changed direction. It spun wildly, veering off course, before exploding in empty space. The Exareth captain's face twisted in fury. She's using her powers, he growled. Inside the Starfire, Rilke opened her eyes, breathing heavily. Daniel stared at her in shock. Did you just? I told you, she said weakly. I can help. But she was pale, shaking. Using her abilities had drained her energy. Daniel didn't have much time. He turned back to the controls and checked the hyperdrive. 85% rebooted. Almost there. But then, another warning blared. The Exareth ship was charging a rail cannon. One shot. That's all it would take. Daniel. Rilke's voice was faint. We have to go. He had seconds to act. And then, he made a choice. He slammed the throttle forward, heading straight for the warship. Rilke's eyes widened. What are you doing? Buying us a few more seconds, Daniel shouted. The enemy ship hesitated, and in that moment, a hyperdrive hit 100%. Daniel grabbed the controls, input the jump coordinates, and punched it. The Starfire vanished into hyperspace, leaving the Exarath warship behind. The last thing Daniel heard was the furious roar of the Exarath captain. Then, silence. The chase was over. For now, the deadly pursuit. The Starfire streaked through hyperspace, the blue-white tunnel of light surrounding the ship like a protective cocoon. Inside, Daniel finally exhaled, his fingers loosening from the control stick. His heart was still hammering in his chest. They had escaped. For now. He turned in his seat and looked at Rilke. She was slumped against the bulkhead, her breathing shallow. Sweat beaded her violet skin, and her silver eyes fluttered with exhaustion. Daniel frowned. You don't look so good. She didn't respond. Instead, her voice whispered in his mind. I used too much energy. Daniel stood and quickly grabbed a med kit from the supply locker. He wasn't a doctor, but he could at least do something. He pulled out a hydration pack, knelt beside her, and placed it in her trembling hands. Drink, he ordered. She weakly pressed the pack to her lips, taking a few slow sips. Her body relaxed slightly, but she still looked drained. Daniel narrowed his eyes. What the hell happened back there? You hijacked a missile with your mind. You made me fly like some kind of ace pilot. And now you look like you just ran a marathon. Rilke exhaled. My abilities are not limitless, she admitted. The more I use them, the more they drain me. If I use too much, I could die. Daniel's stomach twisted. She had risked her life to help him escape. Yeah, let's not do that again, he muttered. But even as he spoke, something felt off. A nagging sensation at the back of his skull. Like they were still being washed. The Exarath are not finished. Deep in the void of space, the Exarath warship hovered like a wounded beast. Its captain, Commander Vorik, glared at the empty void where the Starfire had vanished. His crimson eyes burned with rage. The human dares to interfere, he hissed, his long, clawed fingers clenched into fists. One of his officers hesitated before speaking. Sir, the girl's psychic interference disabled our targeting systems. We couldn't get a clear lock before they jumped. Vorik's gaze snapped toward him. Do you think I care for your excuses? The officer flinched. Vorik took a slow breath, regaining his composure. The human ship cannot run forever, he said. We have trackers in place. Wherever they go, we will find them. A holographic star map flickered to life before him. A cluster of routes spread across the sector, and one path glowed red. Their jump trajectory leads to the Draken Rift, a lawless sector filled with smugglers, criminals, and rogue traders. He smiled coldly. Perfect. There will be nowhere to hide. The Draken Rift, a dangerous haven. Back aboard the Starfire, Daniel stared at his navigation screen, analyzing the system they were approaching. The Draken Rift. He groaned. Of all the places to land, it had to be here. Rilke opened her tired eyes. Where are we? A sector full of cutthroats, thieves, and bounty hunters, Daniel replied. It's the last place any sane person would go, which means it's probably the best place to hide. Rilke didn't argue. She simply nodded. Daniel sighed and adjusted their course. All right, we'll find a safe spot, lay low, and figure out our next move. But as he spoke, the nagging sensation in his head grew stronger. Something wasn't right. And then, the ship's alarms blared. Daniel spun toward the controls. An incoming transmission. Rilke's eyes widened. They found us. Daniel clenched his jaw. No, someone else did. He hesitated, then answered the call. A hologram flickered to life, a grinning alien with reptilian skin, gold-plated teeth, and a mercenary's gaze. "Well, well, well," the stranger chuckled. "If it isn't Captain Carter. Long time no see." Daniel's stomach sank. He knew that voice. Zurich, a bounty hunter, a killer for hire, and judging by the bounty notice flashing on Daniel's screen, he was here for Rilke. The bounty on her head. Rilke's breath hitched as she read the transmission. Her face appeared on a wanted poster. 500,000 credits, dead or alive. Daniel's fingers tightened into fists. 500,000 credits, he muttered, for one girl. Zurich's smile widened. "You know me, Carter. I don't care about the details. I just want the payday. And right now, you're sitting on the galaxy's biggest prize." Daniel glanced at Rilke. She was already weak. She wouldn't survive being sold to the highest bidder. And Zurich, he wasn't the kind of guy to negotiate. Rilke's voice whispered in his mind. "Daniel, you don't have to fight for me. This isn't your problem." Daniel took a deep breath. And then, he did something reckless. He cut the transmission. Then, he gunned the thrusters. "Hold on," he growled. "We're getting out of here." But as the Starfire sped toward the nearest asteroid field, 3 more bounty hunter ships appeared on the radar. They were surrounded. The unexpected power within. The Starfire twisted and turned through the asteroid field, its engines roaring as Daniel pushed the ship to its limits. Behind them, 3 bounty hunter ships closed in fast, weapons hot. In the cockpit, Daniel's fingers flew over the controls. His eyes flicked between the radar and the incoming rock formations. Rilke gripped the co-pilot's seat, still weak but alert. "They're gaining on us," she warned. Daniel gritted his teeth. "Yeah, I noticed." A sudden plasma blast tore past the ship's hull, shaking the entire cockpit. The bounty hunters were done waiting. They were moving in for the kill. Zurich's ultimatum. A voice crackled over the comms. "Come on, Carter," Zurich sneered. "You know how this ends. Give me the girl, and I'll let you live." Daniel ignored him, weaving through the asteroids with inhuman precision. Zurich's laughter echoed through the cockpit. "You're a good pilot, Carter, I'll give you that," he said. "But you can't run forever. Your ship's fast, but mine's faster. You're outgunned, outnumbered, and out of time." Daniel clenched his jaw. Zurich wasn't wrong. They were running out of options. Then, a sharp pain stabbed into his skull. It wasn't an injury. It was a feeling. Like something inside him was unlocking. "Daniel," Rilke's voice whispered in his mind. "Trust me." She placed a hand on his shoulder, her fingers cold but steady. And suddenly, everything changed. The human mind awakens. A rush of sensation flooded Daniel's brain. He could see the bounty hunter ships, not just visually, but like he could feel them moving through space. Every motion, every adjustment of their thrusters, it was like he could predict their attacks before they even happened. He pulled the Starfire into an impossible roll, dodging 3 plasma shots at once. His reaction speed wasn't human anymore. His hands moved with unnatural precision, anticipating enemy movements before they made them. Rilke's voice was in his head again. "Your mind is different from others. I have unlocked something inside you." Daniel had no idea what she meant, but he didn't have time to question it. The bounty hunters were still on them, and he was about to turn the tables. The hunters become the hunted. Daniel's ship twisted through the asteroid belt, slipping between massive space rocks with ease. Zurich's ship, faster but bulkier, struggled to match his movements. "Damn it," Zurich growled. "That's not how Carter flies." Another hunter pilot spoke up. "Something's wrong. He's predicting our attacks." Zurich's eyes narrowed. He had hunted humans before. He knew their weaknesses, but this wasn't normal. Daniel Carter was fighting like something more than human. And then, he attacked. With a sudden burst of thrusters, Daniel flipped the Starfire and raced toward his pursuers. The hunters barely had time to react before he was on them. Daniel fired his plasma cannons, striking the closest enemy ship dead on. The blast tore through its shields, sending it spinning into a nearby asteroid. Boom! The ship exploded on impact. Zirek cursed. He just took out Balo. Daniel smirked. That's one down. The Exarath interference. Just as Daniel prepared to take down the next hunter, a new warning flashed on his screen. Another ship was approaching. Fast. But it wasn't a bounty hunter. It was Exarath. Rilke gasped. They found us. Zyrek's voice came back over the comms, a mixture of frustration and amusement. Well, he muttered. Looks like you've got bigger problems, Carter. The Exarath warship dropped out of hyperspace, massive and terrifying. Daniel's blood ran cold. One bounty hunter was bad enough. But now, they were trapped between two deadly forces. A desperate gamble. Rilke grabbed Daniel's arm. Daniel, we need to get out of here. I can sense them. This time, they brought a full fleet. Daniel took a deep breath. He checked his scanners. There was only one way out. The Draken Rift storm. A swirling mass of ion-charged clouds. Impossible to navigate. Pilots called it the death zone. Zirek chuckled over the comms. You wouldn't dare. Daniel smirked. Watch me. He slammed the thrusters forward, diving straight toward the storm. The bounty hunters and the Exarath hesitated. No sane pilot would fly into the rift storm. But Daniel, he wasn't flying alone anymore. Rilke's hand tightened on his arm. Her voice was calm, certain. I can guide you. Daniel grinned. Then let's give them a show. And with that, the Starfire plunged into the storm, vanishing into the chaos. The ultimate escape and revelation. Inside the rift storm, the Starfire plunged into the Draken Rift storm, its hull rattling as powerful energy waves surged through the swirling clouds of charged plasma. Lightning arced across the ship's shields, sending static through the cockpit controls. Daniel gritted his teeth as he gripped the flight controls. The storm was pure chaos. Visibility was near zero. Scanners were scrambled, and the gravitational distortions made normal navigation impossible. But he wasn't flying alone. Rilke's hand was still on his arm. Her telepathic energy pulsed faintly through his mind, guiding him through the maelstrom. Trust your instincts, her voice whispered in his thoughts. Feel the currents. The storm isn't random. It moves like a living thing. Daniel took a deep breath and closed his eyes for a second. And then, he felt it. The pull of the gravitational eddies, the way the currents twisted and shifted, the pattern hidden in the storm's chaos. His hands moved on their own, adjusting the thrusters, weaving through lightning strikes and energy surges with unnatural precision. If anyone had been watching from the outside, they would have thought the Starfire was dancing through the storm. Even Rilke's eyes widened in amazement. You're adapting faster than I expected, she murmured. Daniel exhaled, his grip steady. Yeah, I noticed. And it's kind of freaking me out. The hunters refused to give up. Behind them, Zirek and the Exarath warship hovered at the storm's edge. The bounty hunter's golden teeth flashed in a grin. He actually went in. One of his crew muttered, "No one's ever come back from the rift storm." Zirek leaned forward, studying the energy signatures flickering across his display. Carter's not no one. If he makes it out, he'll be worth twice the bounty. And I want my payday. The Exarath commander Vorik was less amused. His glowing red eyes narrowed. The girl is too dangerous to leave alive, he growled. Deploy the specters. Zirek turned toward him. You're sending them in. The commander's voice was cold. She is not to escape. From the Exarath warship, 3 black, nearly invisible ships detached from the main hull. The Spectres, stealth-class fighters, engineered for deadly precision. They vanished into the storm, hunting their prey. The first attack. Inside the Starfire, Daniel's warning alarm screamed. "Something's wrong," he muttered. "I don't see anything." But before he could finish, a violent impact rocked the ship. Boom! Rilke gasped, her grip tightening on her seat. "They're here." Daniel's sensors remained blank, but something was attacking them. He yanked the controls, rolling the ship sideways just as another impact struck the hull. Sparks flew from the panels. Rilke closed her eyes, focusing. And then, her eyes snapped open, glowing faintly. 3 ships. Fast. Cloaked. Daniel's heart pounded. "Any ideas? If I connect to you again, I might be able to enhance your perception. Let you see them." Daniel hesitated. The last time she had unlocked his abilities, it nearly drained her completely. "You'll be okay." Rilke nodded. "I'll hold on." Daniel swallowed hard. "All right. Let's do it." She placed her hands on his temples. A pulse of energy surged through his mind. And then, everything shifted. The storm's swirling plasma currents sharpened. The invisible ships became outlines of energy, moving in the darkness. For the first time, Daniel saw his enemies. And now, he could fight back. The battle in the storm. The specters swooped in, their cloaked weapons firing plasma bursts from the shadows. But Daniel was one step ahead. He spun the Starfire in a tight corkscrew, dodging the attack with perfect timing. He locked onto the nearest ship and fired a countershot. A direct hit. The enemy ship erupted into flames, its wreckage swallowed by the storm. The second Spectre ship fired, but Daniel was already moving. He felt its intent before it even pulled the trigger. He twisted the ship sideways, dodging just in time. The third Spectre came at him from below. A mistake. Daniel slammed his thrusters in reverse, flipping behind it and unloading a full plasma barrage. The Spectre detonated in a flash of blue fire. One ship left. Zurich and the Xerath commander watched in disbelief. "This isn't possible," Vorik muttered. "He's just a human." Zurich smirked. "Looks like Carter isn't playing by the rules anymore." The last Spectre tried to flee, but Daniel's instincts locked onto its movement. He fired a well-placed shot directly into its engine core. The ship exploded in a silent flash of light. The Starfire flew forward, free of its pursuers. The final revelation. As soon as the battle ended, Rilke slumped forward, exhausted. Daniel caught her before she fell, lowering her gently into the co-pilot's seat. She blinked up at him, her energy nearly drained. You did it," she whispered. Daniel swallowed. "I felt them. I knew where they were before they moved. What's happening to me?" Rilke's expression was unreadable. "Humans are not as ordinary as they believe," she murmured. Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. Then the truth came. "The Xerath have feared your kind for centuries." Daniel's breath caught. "Why?" "Because," Rilke whispered, her voice barely audible, "they know that one day, humans will be the only species that can stop them." Daniel stared at her. For the first time, the weight of the war, the chase, the bounty on her head, everything made sense. The Xerath weren't just after her. They were afraid of him. And now, they would never stop hunting him down. The final stand and new alliance. A moment of silence before the storm. The Starfire drifted silently through the void, just beyond the storm's edge. The ship's hull was scared from battle. The energy flickering off the Draken Rift storm cast eerie shadows across the cockpit. Daniel sat in the pilot's chair, staring out at the stars. His mind was still racing from what Rilke had said. "The Xerath fear your kind, because they know that one day humans will be the only species that can stop them." The words haunted him. Rilke lay nearby, still weak from using her abilities. She had pushed herself too far saving him. And yet, she looked at him with something unexpected. "Hope. I didn't think I would ever escape them," she whispered in his mind. "But now, I believe we have a chance." Daniel exhaled slowly. A chance to do what? Keep running. Rilke shook her head. No, a chance to fight back. The Exarath's last move. In the darkness of deep space, Commander Vorik seethed in rage. The human should have died in that storm. Instead, he had done the impossible. This is not over, he growled, his crimson eyes glowing in the dim light. The specters had failed. The bounty hunters had failed. It was time for drastic measures. He turned to his bridge officers. Activate the bloodborne protocol. The room fell silent. Even the most hardened Exarath warriors hesitated at those words. One officer swallowed nervously. Sir, that will alert every bounty hunter, mercenary, and warlord in the sector. The human will have nowhere to hide. Vorik smiled coldly. Exactly. A signal pulsed through the void. Across the galaxy, screens flickered on. The holonetworks of crime syndicates and bounty guilds flashed a new target. New Galactic bounty. 2 million Suridites. Tar Get. Human Captain Daniel Carter. The hunt had begun. Nowhere left to hide. Daniel's eyes widened as the emergency alert flashed on his screen. Son of a... His voice trailed off as the bounty amount loaded. 2 million credits. That was double what they had offered for Rilke. His hands tightened into fists. They've put a price on my head now. Rilke's face paled. They see you as a threat now. They won't stop. Daniel let out a bitter laugh. Yeah, no kidding. Then, his scanners pinged. Multiple ships, incoming. Bounty hunters. They were already here. Rilke sat up quickly. Daniel, we have to move. But Daniel didn't touch the controls. His expression was calm. No, he said. I'm done running. The battle for freedom. The first bounty hunter ship dropped out of hyperspace, its weapons glowing. Then another, and another. Within minutes, a dozen bounty hunters had surrounded them. A voice crackled over the comms. Daniel Carter, a robotic voice said. You are *** worth more alive than dead. Power down your ship, and this will be painless. Daniel smirked. Yeah, that's funny. Funny. Yeah. His hands tightened on the controls. Because you actually think you're taking me alive. The Starfire's thrusters roared as he threw the ship into a sudden roll. Before the hunters could react, he fired. Plasma bursts tore through the nearest ship, sending it spiraling into flames. The remaining hunters scrambled, opening fire in return. But Daniel was already moving. He anticipated their shots. He dodged before they even pulled the trigger. It wasn't skill alone. It was something more. Rilke's voice echoed in his mind. You are awakening. He could see the battlefield in his mind. Every angle, every movement, every possibility. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was winning. A new legend is born. One by one, the bounty hunter ships fell. Explosions lit up the void, debris scattering into the darkness. The last remaining hunter hesitated. He had never seen a human fight like this. And in that moment, he fled. The Starfire hovered in the silent aftermath, its hull smoking, but still standing. Rilke turned to Daniel, stunned. You just fought off an entire fleet, she whispered. Alone. Daniel exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Not alone, he corrected. He looked at her. Then, he made a decision. He had two choices. Run forever, always looking over his shoulder, always one step ahead of the next bounty hunter. Fight back. He clenched his fists. The Exarath thought humans were dangerous. It was time to prove them right. He turned to Rilke and smirked. You said we have a chance to fight back, right? She nodded. Yes. His eyes burned with new determination. Then let's stop running. Rilke's silver eyes widened. Then a slow smile crossed her lips. Then we fight. The Starfire turned toward deep space, no longer a fleeing ship, but a ship on a mission. Epilogue. The war begins. In the depths of the Exarath High Command, alarms blared. A commander rushed into the council chambers, his face pale. "Sir," he gasped, "we have reports coming in." The bounty hunters failed. The High General turned slowly. Failed. His voice was cold. The officer swallowed. "Sir, the human is still alive. And now." He hesitated. The general narrowed his glowing eyes. "What?" The officer lowered his head. "He's fighting back." The general's expression darkened. The room fell into dead silence. And in that silence, a new legend was born.